You're nothing without me.
He spat the day he threw her out. Then he took her land, the only thing she had left, and built 10 luxurious homes on it for his new wife and their friends. Every morning she watched from afar as laughter echoed from the place that once held her dreams. They called her pathetic, said she'd never rise again. But the thing about broken hearts, they remember every storm. And when he least expected it, the sky turned against him, the same sky that had once heard her cry. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. It doesn't shout or scream. It flows, quiet, steady, unstoppable, just like the flood that swallowed his empire whole. This is the story of a woman they mocked, betrayed and buried, until her silence drowned everything built on her pain, and today it is being retold by me. Clara used to believe that if you loved someone enough, they'd never turn on you. That belief died the night Daniel looked at her across a table filled with roses and candlelight and said, "You've become a burden, Clara." It was their 12th wedding anniversary. The whole house glowed like something out of a magazine: music, laughter, photographers, and the smell of wine and expensive perfume floating through the air. Daniel had gone all out, or at least that's what Clara thought. She'd spent all week planning the dinner menu and dressing carefully, excited to finally have a night that felt like old times. But the way Daniel held her hand that night was different. Cold, measured, like he was touching a stranger he didn't want to offend. She'd seen that look before, just never directed at her. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly as guests poured more champagne. He smiled, that public smile he always wore when people were watching. Perfect, charming, dishonest. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Tonight's special. I want everyone to see how far we've come." She believed him. Of course she did. That's what love does. It blinds you just long enough to make betrayal sting harder. When the toast began, Clara stood proudly by his side. He wrapped an arm around her waist and lifted his glass. "To my beautiful wife," he said, his voice steady and smooth. "The woman who stood by me when I had nothing. You've given me everything." People clapped. She blushed. Her heart warmed. Then he set the glass down, turned toward her and said, "And because of that, you deserve the truth tonight." The room went silent. She frowned, confused. "Daniel, what are you—" He cut her off. "Clara and we've been trying for years to have a family. You all know that. But what you don't know is, she can't." A murmur rippled through the guests. Someone gasped. Clara froze. Daniel's voice didn't tremble. "We've seen every doctor, every specialist. Nothing worked, and I've realized something painful but important. It's time for me to stop pretending that's enough. I want children, and I can't waste any more years hoping for a miracle." The floor seemed to tilt beneath her. She could feel her pulse in her ears. "Daniel," she whispered, her throat tight. "Not here. Please." But he kept going, his tone soft enough to sound almost noble. "Clara, you've been my partner, my friend, my teacher. But this marriage has become a dead end. I need a new start." Cameras clicked, phones recorded, and that's when Madison stepped forward. Clara's stomach twisted. Madison, her best friend since college, the woman who'd been her maid of honor, the one who cried at her wedding, walked slowly out from behind the crowd. She was wearing Clara's necklace, the one Daniel gave her on their 5th anniversary, a gold chain with a single teardrop diamond. Madison's hand slid into Daniel's like it belonged there. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Clara," she said, her voice trembling with fake pity. "You'll understand one day. We didn't plan this, it just happened." The crowd gasped again. Daniel's arm went around Madison's waist. Clara couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The air around her thickened until it felt like she was under water. People began whispering, phones lighting up, someone recording. Daniel smiled for the cameras, as if the whole thing were a marketing stunt. Then he said it, the line that would haunt her for months. "You're nothing without me." Her knees almost buckled. She turned to leave, but security, her own security team, stepped in front of her. Daniel had already replaced her name on everything, the company, the house, the land. "Please, Mrs. Hayes," one of them muttered awkwardly. "Mr. Hayes said you're no longer authorized to enter the property." Mrs. Hayes. That title didn't even belong to her anymore. Daniel leaned in close, his whisper colder than the rain that would later soak her to the bone. "You can keep your sentimental junk. I've already taken care of the rest. Everything here is mine now." Clara's voice cracked. "You forged my father's land deeds. You made me sign papers you said were for taxes." He shrugged, smiling just enough for the cameras to catch it. "Business, darling. You should have read them," Madison smirked, resting a manicured hand on his chest. "Don't worry, Clara. We'll take good care of your memories." The words hit harder than any slap. Someone guided her toward the door. She didn't fight. What was the point? Outside, rain had begun to fall, soft at first, then heavier. The sound of it on the marble steps blurred with her own heartbeat. She didn't cry until she reached the car. Hours later, her belongings, what Daniel hadn't locked away, were dumped at the edge of the road. 2 suitcases, a box of photos, and her father's old tools. The driver didn't even meet her eyes when he said, "Mr. Hayes said you'd know where to go." She did. The cabin by the dam. Her father built it decades ago as a storage shed for equipment. It was small, damp, and half forgotten, but it was hers. The only piece Daniel couldn't touch. That night she lit a fire and sat on the floor surrounded by the echo of her own breathing. The silence pressed down like a weight. She took out one of the framed photos from the box, her and Daniel, smiling under the apple trees her father planted. She remembered that day. Daniel had said, "This land will make us rich one day." She'd laughed. "It already has. It gave us each other." Now those same apple trees were being torn down by bulldozers she could hear in the distance. In the days that followed, Clara learned just how deep Daniel's betrayal went. Every bank account was frozen. Every property document had been updated. The law firm that once handled their family affairs refused to take her calls. The lawyers were Daniel's now, too. When she went to the courthouse, she found out the land transfer had been filed 6 months earlier, with her signature on it. Except she'd never signed those pages. It was Ethan, her brother, who told her the truth. He came to her cabin 2 weeks later, wearing a new suit and shiny shoes that didn't belong to the man who once fixed fences with their father. "Clara," he began, his voice heavy with forced guilt. "I came to explain." She stared at him, her eyes hollow. "Explain what? How you sold me out?" He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Daniel offered me a job. You know how hard things have been since Dad died. He said it was just business paperwork, that you'd already agreed. I didn't think—" She cut him off sharply. "No, you didn't think. You just signed away our father's land for a paycheck." "It's not like that. It's exactly like that." Ethan's shoulders slumped. "Look, you'll land on your feet. You're smart. You'll find someone else. Daniel was never good for you anyway." The casual cruelty in his tone snapped something inside her. "Get out." He hesitated. "Clara, get out." He left without another word, closing the door gently like he was leaving a hospital room instead of a home. That night, Clara walked outside. The air smelled of wet soil and machinery. In the distance, floodlights from Daniel's construction site burned through the mist. The sound of engines and metal echoed across the valley as workers tore apart her father's orchard to make way for Paradise Heights, a name that sounded like mockery. She stood at the edge of the dam, rain soaking her hair, her face, her clothes. The water below churned dark and deep, reflecting flashes of lightning. Her father once told her that the land has memory, that it feels every footprint, every harvest, every storm. "If the earth remembers every drop of my tears," she whispered into the wind, her voice breaking, "then one day it'll give them back." Thunder rolled in response, distant but heavy, like the promise of something coming. She didn't know it then, but that was the moment Clara stopped being broken and started becoming dangerous. The rain didn't stop for days. It was as if the sky itself wanted to mourn with her, weeping until the ground could hold no more. Clara stayed inside the cabin, living on canned food and silence. She kept the curtains drawn, because she couldn't bear to see the flashing construction lights across the valley. Every morning she woke up to the sound of hammers, drills, and men shouting orders. They were building luxury homes on the graves of her memories. Each nail they drove into the ground felt like another wound. Sometimes she walked to the dam just to watch. She would stand there, arms folded, staring down at the water that ran through her father's land, now claimed by the man who had destroyed her life. She told herself she just wanted to see it, to know how far they'd gone. But deep down there was something else, something darker forming inside her, something that whispered every time she looked at the construction site. One day, they'll pay for this. Weeks passed. Daniel's project grew fast. The bulldozers finished their work, clearing away the orchard where her father once taught her how to plant. Now there were foundations being poured, bricks stacked neatly, and a shiny sign at the gate, Paradise Heights, a vision by Daniel Hayes. It was almost laughable. Daniel had always been ambitious. When they met, he was a struggling builder who couldn't get a bank loan without Clara's credit. She'd believed in him, even when no one else did. She used her father's land as collateral so Daniel could start his first company. She stood beside him through every setback, every sleepless night, every argument with investors. She had been his anchor, and he had used that anchor to drown her. One afternoon, she heard a car approaching the cabin. She froze, instinctively pulling her cardigan tighter. When the car door slammed, she peeked out the window. Madison. She looked different now, dressed in sleek white, her long hair perfectly curled, sunglasses hiding her eyes. There was a new car behind her, glossy and expensive. Clara felt her throat tighten. Madison stepped out, holding an umbrella, her heels clicking against the wet gravel. She looked around as if the place disgusted her. Then she spotted Clara at the window and smiled faintly, waving like they were old friends catching up. Clara didn't move. Madison knocked once, then twice. "Clara, I know you're in there. We need to talk." Clara opened the door halfway, her expression cold. "What could we possibly have to talk about?" Madison gave a soft laugh. "You're angry, I get it. But holding grudges won't help you. I came to offer you something." Clara raised an eyebrow. "You came to offer me something?" Madison took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were sharp, glinting with the kind of confidence only cruelty can buy. "Daniel doesn't want you to suffer, you know. He actually feels bad." "Feels bad?" Clara repeated quietly, her voice shaking with restrained fury. "He took everything from me, Madison. He humiliated me in front of everyone we know. He forged my father's land into his company's name, and you," her voice cracked, "you stood beside him smiling while he did it." Madison shrugged. "That's life. You had your chance. He wanted more, and you couldn't give it to him." Clara's heart pounded. "More what? Money? Power?" "A family," Madison said simply, her lips curling into a smug smile. something you couldn't give him. Clara's hands trembled. Get off my land. Madison's tone turned cold. Your land? You really still believe that, don't you? Look around, Clara. It's not yours anymore. You're standing on borrowed ground. Clara stepped forward until she was inches away from Madison. Her voice was low, calm, but there was a darkness behind it that made Madison step back. Everything he built on this land, one day it'll fall, and when it does, I'll be there watching. Madison smirked. You're pathetic. Clara smiled faintly. We'll see. Madison turned on her heel and walked away, but not before calling over her shoulder, Daniel said to tell you he's naming the first house after me, the Madison. The words hung in the air long after her car disappeared down the muddy road. That night, Clara didn't sleep. She sat by the fire with an old photo album in her lap, flipping through the pages slowly. Every picture told a lie she'd once believed. Their wedding, their first home, the ribbon-cutting ceremony of Daniel's company. In every photo, Daniel's smile looked genuine. Now she saw it for what it was, a performance. When dawn came, she walked to the dam again. The water was calm that morning, the surface still and glassy. She picked up a stone and tossed it in, watching the ripples spread wider and wider. For a long time she stood there thinking. About how Daniel used to call her his lucky charm. About how Madison used to come over for dinner and compliment Clara's cooking, laughing too loudly at Daniel's jokes. About the night Daniel said, "You don't need to work. I'll take care of you." He wasn't taking care of her. He was taking control. Now she saw every small decision, every form she signed, every account he asked her to temporarily link to his business, for what it was, a slow, careful setup. And she'd walked right into it. By noon she packed a small bag and walked into town. She needed to see things for herself. She stopped at the county office to ask for a copy of her land deed. The clerk frowned, typing her name into the computer. After a long pause, he said, "Ma'am, it says here the property was transferred to Hayes Development 7 months ago. It's legally under their ownership now." Clara's stomach turned. "Can I see the signature?" He hesitated, then printed a page and slid it across the counter. Her name was there, scrawled in black ink, except it wasn't her handwriting. Her fingers went numb. She stared at the paper until her vision blurred. "That's not mine," she whispered. The clerk looked uncomfortable. "If you believe it's a forgery, you can file a report, but—" She cut him off. "But Daniel Hayes owns the county board, doesn't he?" The man didn't answer. He didn't have to. Clara walked out, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. On the street outside, people were laughing, shopping, living normal lives. She felt like a ghost among them. When she got back to the cabin, the first thing she saw was a white envelope sitting on the cab doorstep. No return address, just her name written in bold letters. She opened it. Inside was a single photo of Daniel and Madison standing together at the construction site, smiling under a banner that read, "Paradise Heights, grand opening soon." Under the photo, in neat handwriting, were 3 words. "You're forgotten now." She stood there staring at the picture until the wind ripped it from her fingers. It fluttered into the dam's water and sank slowly beneath the surface. That night, the storm returned. The wind howled through the valley, rattling the cabin windows. Clara sat up in bed, listening to the thunder roll and the rain crash against the roof. Then, through the noise, she heard something else, faint but clear. Laughter. She stepped outside and saw lights glowing across the valley. Daniel and Madison were hosting another party, their laughter carried across the water like a cruel echo. She could see silhouettes moving, glasses raised, music pulsing. They were celebrating her erasure. She walked to the edge of the dam, The rain stung her face, soaking her hair until it clung to her skin. Her reflection in the water looked nothing like the woman Daniel had discarded. This version of her looked sharper, colder, alive in a different way. She whispered, "If the earth remembers every drop of my tears, then one day it'll give them back." The words hung in the air, swallowed by thunder. She stood there for a long time, staring into the dark water below, her eyes unblinking, her heart silent. The next morning, when the storm had passed, the sun rose over a valley washed clean. But not everything had been washed away. Something had stayed behind, something steady, quiet, and unstoppable. In the days that followed, Clara stopped crying. She started watching. She learned the workers' schedules, the construction patterns, the layout of the new homes. She noticed where the water from the dam flowed when the gates opened, and which parts of the valley sat lower than others. And every night, she wrote things down in a small notebook, times, names, patterns, mistakes. Because when they took everything from her, they forgot one thing. They forgot that she knew this land better than anyone alive. Hello, family. If you haven't subscribed yet, we'd love for you to join our community by hitting the subscribe button. Through our stories, we build hope and give a future to children and women who have been abused all over the world. Motivate us by subscribing and turning on your notification bell so you never miss a story that matters. Also, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from and how did this story speak to you? The small town never changed much, even when people did. Its streets still smelled like coffee and rain, its shops still opened early, and gossip still spread faster than wind. 3 months after Daniel threw her out, Clara came back into town quietly. She walked down Main Street with her head high and her heart steady, carrying a small cleaning kit in one hand and a folder of references in the other. Nobody expected her to return, and those who noticed her whispered behind her back. "That's Daniel Hayes's ex-wife," someone murmured, "the one who lost the farm." She heard them, but she didn't react. Words couldn't cut her anymore. She'd already bled out everything that could hurt. Clara got work quickly, cleaning houses for families she used to host parties with. The irony wasn't lost on her. She used to serve champagne to these same people. Now she scrubbed their floors. But she didn't mind. Work kept her mind quiet. Her first client was one of Daniel's investors, a woman named Mrs. Lang. She lived in one of the newly finished houses at Paradise Heights. Clara kept her head down as she mopped the marble floors, but she couldn't help overhearing 2 guests in the living room. "I told Daniel those retaining walls wouldn't hold through heavy rain," one man said. "He's rushing the drainage work." Another voice laughed. "He doesn't care about safety. He just wants those homes sold before the next inspection." Clara froze mid-swipe, her heartbeat quickening. She listened closer, pretending to wipe a table. "The inspector's already been paid off," the man added in a low tone. "Daniel's got the whole department in his pocket. You think any of them will risk their job?" Her stomach turned. It made sense now. Daniel's speed, his arrogance, his confidence that nothing could touch him. He was building on rotten ground, just like the lies he told. That night, back in her cabin, she wrote down what she'd heard. She'd started keeping records, dates, names, whispers, anything that felt important. At first it was just a way to vent, but lately it had begun to feel like preparation. A week later she took a cleaning job at her brother Ethan's new house. She hadn't seen him since their argument, but she needed the work. He wasn't home when she arrived, only his housekeeper, who barely looked at her. Ethan's house smelled of new money and guilt. Everything inside was sleek and polished. White walls, leather chairs, the kind of modern furniture that had no warmth. While dusting his office, Clara's attention caught on a half-open drawer. Inside were several files, a few marked with Daniel's company logo. She knew she shouldn't, but something in her gut told her to look. She pulled out a small black ledger. It wasn't thick, but it was filled with numbers and signatures. As she flipped through it, Her eyes widened. Loans, transfers, names she recognized from Daniel's projects. And then she saw it, her own. C. Matthews Hayes, listed as the guarantor on several high-value loans. Her father's land deed had been used as collateral to secure Daniel's construction money. Every house, every dollar, every brick built on that land had come from her name. Her throat went dry. For a moment she couldn't breathe. She took photos of every page with her phone, slipped the ledger back where she found it, and left before Ethan came home. Outside, the wind had picked up again, brushing her hair into her face. She looked back at the glowing houses of Paradise Heights and whispered, "You built your empire on me, Daniel. On my land, my name, and my blood. I hope it remembers." A few days later, she met Noah. She was walking near the dam, carrying groceries, when she saw a truck parked by the control shed. A man stood near the water, clipboard in hand, watching the current with quiet focus. He was in his mid-30s, tall, wearing a city engineer's jacket. His face looked weathered in a kind way, someone who'd seen too much but still chose to do good. He turned when he heard her footsteps. "You shouldn't be this close to the edge. The ground's soft after all that rain." "I know this dam better than I know myself," she replied. He smiled faintly. "Then you know how dangerous that is." She tilted her head. "You're not from the company. Daniel doesn't hire people who sound like they care." That made him laugh, just a little. "I don't work for him. Name's Noah Carter. I'm with the city engineering department. We're doing routine safety checks." "Routine," she repeated. "That's funny. Daniel hasn't allowed any inspections for years." His expression shifted. "That's what worries me." They stood in silence for a moment, both looking at the water. Finally, Noah said quietly, "This dam was never meant to hold back this much pressure. And with all the construction he's added downstream." He trailed off, shaking his head. "If something goes wrong, it won't just be property damage." Her pulse quickened. "You mean lives?" He nodded. "I've been trying to get access to the maintenance records, but his company claims they're confidential. Someone's covering up missing funds. The dam budget's been drained for years." "Drained," she said softly, almost to herself. "That sounds about right." He glanced at her, studying her face. "You've lost something because of him, haven't you?" Clara met his eyes and for the first time in months didn't flinch. "Everything." He nodded slowly, not asking for details. "Then maybe we can help each other." That night, Clara thought about Noah's words. A man investigating Daniel for missing funds, for safety violations, for lies buried under cement. It felt like the first crack in Daniel's perfect wall. She began spending more time near the dam, pretending to walk or collect firewood, but always watching. Sometimes she found Noah there, studying reports, muttering numbers to himself. He wasn't talkative, but his silence wasn't cold, it was thoughtful. One afternoon she asked him why he cared so much. "My dad used to work maintenance here," he said quietly, eyes on the water. "He died when I was a kid. Official reports said it was an accident, a gate malfunction. But later I found out Daniel's first company handled the repair contracts. The same year, they cut corners and didn't replace the safety parts." She felt a chill. "You think your father's death was Daniel's fault?" "I don't think," Noah said. "I know." From that moment, something changed between them. It wasn't friendship yet, but an understanding. Two people broken in different ways by the same man. As the weeks passed, Clara's resolve hardened. She no longer saw herself as a victim. She was a witness collecting truth. Every whispered complaint she overheard while cleaning, every document she copied, every suspicious payment Noah uncovered, it all began to form a pattern, and Daniel's pattern always ended the same way: greed covered in charm. By early summer, Daniel's company was in overdrive. New homes were being advertised everywhere, with Madison's face plastered across billboards. She'd become the brand, the new Mrs. Hayes. One evening, Clara stopped at the cafe after work. On the TV mounted above the counter, Madison's latest video played. The clip showed her walking through one of the new luxury kitchens, laughing, holding up a sparkling diamond ring, Clara's old wedding ring. "You can't steal what someone threw away," Madison said into the camera, smiling perfectly. "Some of us just know how to make use of things others couldn't handle." The customers laughed. The video cut to a shot of Daniel kissing Madison on the forehead as reporters snapped photos. Clara's hands clenched around her coffee cup until it cracked. People in the cafe noticed her, but pretended not to. She stood, dropped a few bills on the counter, and walked out without a word. That night she didn't sleep again. She sat by the window, the glow from Paradise Heights flickering in the distance. She could almost hear Madison's laughter echoing across the valley. And somewhere below that laughter, she could hear the faint groan of the dam's walls. Something was shifting. In the land, in the water, in her. The next few days passed quietly, but not peacefully. Something had shifted inside Clara. The pain that once hollowed her out had become something sharper. She started to watch Daniel's empire like a hunter studying its prey, waiting for the right moment to strike. She kept working as a cleaner, but her eyes were always open. Paradise Heights had grown into a small city of mansions now, 10 homes lined like trophies along the ridge. Each had Daniel's signature design: massive glass walls, marble patios, and imported stone that gleamed in the sunlight. To everyone else, it looked like a triumph. To Clara, it looked like a monument to stolen lives. She noticed the smallest things, the way puddles never drained after rain, how cracks began forming near the walkways, how workers argued in hushed voices before Daniel arrived. Every week she filled pages of her notebook with notes, sketches, and names. It was her private record of the lies he'd built over her land. One afternoon, while cleaning another investor's house, she overheard 2 contractors talking in the kitchen. They thought she was out of earshot. "Did you see the cracks behind Lot 7? One said. "Those walls are shifting." "Yeah, but keep quiet. Mr. Hayes doesn't want any reports filed. He said the soil's stable." "Stable my ass," the man muttered. "That dam breaks, half this development's underwater." Clara froze in place, heart pounding. They left a minute later, and she slipped outside, her mind racing. She walked to the edge of the property and looked down toward the dam. From up here, she could see faint lines on the earth, like veins running beneath the surface. Maybe no one else noticed, but she did. She'd grown up walking that slope. The ground was sinking. That evening, she went to find Noah. He was standing near the dam again, clipboard in hand, brow furrowed. The wind carried the smell of wet clay and rust. When he saw her, he nodded slightly, like he'd been expecting her. "I heard the contractors talking," she said, breathless. "They said the foundation behind Lot 7 is shifting." Noah sighed, flipping through his notes. "I know. I've been tracking small movements in the soil for weeks. It's worse than they're reporting." "Then stop them," she said. "Report it. Shut the project down." He looked up at her, eyes tired. "You think I haven't tried? The moment I mentioned an independent inspection, my boss got a call from Daniel Hayes. Next day, my access was restricted. He's got everyone bought." Clara's jaw tightened. "There has to be something we can do." Noah hesitated, then lowered his voice. "Clara, I found something. You might want to see this." He pulled a folder from his bag and handed it to her. Inside were photos of cracks along the dam's base, barely visible unless you knew where to look. They were thin, hairline fractures, but there were dozens of them. "These weren't here last year," Noah said, and the maintenance budget for repairs? Gone. The city sent funds to Hayes Development to handle the upkeep. The money vanished, and the reports say all systems stable. Someone forged those documents. Her hands trembled slightly as she looked through the pages. He's risking lives. He doesn't care, Noah said softly. To him, it's all numbers. As long as he keeps selling homes, he'll pretend nothing's wrong. Clara stared at the photos again, her pulse steady but her voice cold. Then maybe we stop pretending too. He studied her for a moment. What are you planning? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. He could see it in her eyes, that calm, frightening resolve. He reached out gently and said, Clara, be careful. I've seen what revenge does to people. Don't let him turn you into what he is. She met his gaze. He already did. The next morning, Clara was cleaning Ethan's house again. He wasn't home, but his phone kept buzzing on the table. When she glanced at the screen, she saw a message from Daniel. Keep those files locked. She can't find out about the loans. Her stomach clenched. There were more secrets, more lies buried somewhere she hadn't uncovered yet. She looked around his office and noticed a small safe behind the desk. She didn't need to open it to know what was inside. It was the kind of silence that told the truth. When Ethan finally returned, she didn't say a word about what she'd seen. She finished her work, gathered her supplies, and left. The time for confrontation would come later. That evening, the sunset stretched red and gold across the valley, casting Paradise Heights in a warm glow that made it look almost beautiful. Almost. Clara stood on her porch, watching as Madison's new video popped up on her phone feed again. Madison was filming herself at the grand opening of another house, her voice sugary sweet. Success is built on courage, Madison said into the camera. And sometimes, letting go of the past is the best thing a woman can do. Clara's thumb hovered over the screen before she shut it off. The irony burned, but she didn't react. Her silence was no longer weakness. It was patience. Later that night, Noah came by the cabin. His face was tense. I need to show you something, he said quietly. They walked together to the dam, flashlights cutting through the dark. He led her down to a narrow maintenance path she hadn't used in years. The air was thick with dampness. When they reached the base, he shone the light across the concrete. The cracks were worse than before, thin at first, but deeper the closer they got to the waterline. How long do we have? Clara asked. Months, maybe less, Noah said. If the rainy season hits hard, the pressure will break through the weak points. And guess what's sitting right in its path? Paradise Heights. Clara stared at the fractures, her jaw tight. The idea of Daniel's glittering empire sinking under the weight of his own greed felt like justice whispered by the earth itself. Noah turned to her. If this dam goes, it won't just hit his homes. People in town could get hurt too. She looked at him, her voice steady. Then maybe we make sure they know before it happens. He frowned. You're talking about exposing him? I'm talking about showing people what kind of man he really is. He nodded slowly. Then I'll help. But Clara, whatever you're thinking beyond that, don't. You don't want to lose yourself. She didn't answer. Instead, she looked out over the dark water, its surface rippling faintly. You think the land remembers? She murmured. What do you mean? My father used to say the land remembers who loves it and who uses it. Daniel used it. I loved it. Maybe it's finally choosing sides. Noah said nothing. He just watched her. And maybe for the first time, he saw what Daniel had really created. Not a broken woman, but something stronger, quieter, and far more dangerous. The next few days moved like clockwork. Clara continued her routine, working, watching, waiting. Rumors of leaks near the dam began to spread through the workers. Some whispered that Daniel was ignoring warnings, others that he'd paid off officials to stay quiet. The lies were catching up faster than he realized. Then, one morning, a package arrived at Clara's doorstep. No return address, just her name handwritten in black ink. Her pulse quickened as she tore it open. Inside was a photograph. Daniel and Madison standing at the estate's front gate, smiling proudly under a banner that read, "Paradise Heights Grand Opening." At first, it looked just like any of the dozens of photos they'd taken together for the press. But as Clara looked closer, she noticed something faintly scrawled across the bottom in red ink. Not printed, but written by hand. "You still own the floodgates." She stared at the words for a long time, her heartbeat echoing in her ears. She looked out through the window toward the dam, where the water shimmered under the evening light. Somewhere deep in her chest, something that had been quiet for months began to stir again. Clara didn't sleep the night she received the letter. She sat by the window until dawn, staring at the dam, tracing every shadow with her eyes. "You still own the floodgates." The words spun through her mind like a haunting melody that refused to fade. By morning, she had one goal: to find out the truth. She met Noah at the edge of the dam that afternoon. He was kneeling near the control shed, checking readings on a small device when she arrived. He looked up, surprised by the determination in her face. "I need to know something," she said, skipping any greeting. "When Daniel took my land, what exactly did he take?" He straightened, brushing off his hands. "The property deed, the development rights, everything tied to the parcels listed in the transfer. Why?" "What about the dam?" she asked. "My father built it before Daniel came along. It wasn't technically part of the farmland. It was classified as private infrastructure, tied to my family's estate." Noah frowned. "You think he took that, too?" "I don't think he could," Clara said. "My father's will made me the trustee for anything connected to water access. It was one of his conditions, because the dam fed the town's lower irrigation system." Noah's eyes narrowed. "If that's true, it would still be under your name in public records." "Then we check," she said. They drove into town, the truck bouncing along the dirt road. The municipal building was quiet that afternoon, the air thick with the smell of paper and coffee. Clara hadn't set foot there since before the divorce. Her hands trembled as she signed her name on the access request form. The clerk disappeared into the back for what felt like forever, then returned with a dusty folder. Clara opened it carefully, her breath catching as she flipped through the pages. The first line stopped her cold. Property title: Matthews Estate. Water access and infrastructure rights. Sole owner, Clara Matthews Hayes. Her name was still there, not a trace of Daniel's company anywhere near it. Noah leaned closer, scanning the legal notes. "Look at this clause," he said, pointing. "It says here the dam and its control system are independent of the main property. It's governed under separate water rights and cannot be transferred without explicit authorization from the listed trustee." Clara exhaled slowly. "That's me." He looked at her with something between disbelief and admiration. "Clara, this means he never owned the dam. He might have stolen the land around it, but legally, you still control the floodgates." Her pulse quickened. "He's built everything downstream, hasn't he? Every house, every road, every promise." "On your water," Noah said quietly. "Without it, Paradise Heights doesn't exist." She laughed softly, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Then maybe the land's been waiting for me all along." They left the office in silence, the weight of the discovery sinking in like thunder before a storm. As Noah dropped her off, he hesitated before driving away. "Whatever you're planning," he said, "make sure it's for more than revenge." Clara looked toward the dam. "Don't worry," she murmured. "It's for justice." The next step was Ethan. If Daniel was the thief, Ethan was the willing accomplice, and she needed him to talk. so Clara swallowed her pride and dialed his number. He didn't answer the first time, but she kept trying until he finally picked up. "Clara?" His tone was cautious. "Ethan," she said softly, "I think we need to stop fighting. I miss my brother." There was silence on the line before he exhaled. "You sound different." "I am," she said. "Can we meet? I just want to talk." They met the next morning at a cafe near the courthouse. He arrived in a crisp suit, looking uncomfortable to be seen with her, like guilt wore his face wherever he went. "You look good," he said awkwardly, stirring his coffee. "Better than I expected." She smiled faintly. "I'm surviving. That's something." He nodded, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. "What did you want to talk about?" "I just want to understand what happened," she said. "The paperwork, the transfers. Daniel said everything was above board, but I know you were the one handling the documents. You wouldn't have helped him unless you thought it was safe." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "Clara, don't make me relive this. You wouldn't understand." "I want to," she said, leaning closer. "Please." He rubbed the back of his neck, sighing. "Fine." Daniel's company was under pressure. Environmental reviews, drainage reports, all that nonsense. The inspectors were going to shut the project down, so he revised some of the data. Her voice tightened. "He falsified the reports?" Ethan didn't meet her eyes. "We all did. The documents said the dam was stable, the runoff areas safe, but we knew there were leaks forming under the main spillway. Daniel said it was temporary. He'd fix it once the houses sold. You know how he is. Everything's about appearances." Clara's stomach turned. "He's building over cracks." "Don't act surprised," Ethan snapped. "You were married to him. You know he never cared about rules." She studied him for a long moment, then softened her tone. "Ethan, I forgive you." He blinked, startled. "You what?" "I said I forgive you. You made a mistake, but you're still my brother." He didn't notice the tiny recorder hidden in her jacket pocket. That night, Clara played the recording back over and over. Ethan's confession filled the cabin like a ghost, his voice admitting everything Daniel had done to cheat the system. It was the first real proof she'd held in her hands. She sent a copy to Noah. His reply came within minutes. "This is enough to start an official review. But be careful, Clara. If Daniel finds out you're behind this, he'll come for you." She smiled faintly. Let him try. The following week, news broke online. A leaked video of Daniel arguing with Madison in a restaurant. Clara hadn't meant to smile when she saw it, but she did. The clip spread fast, shared by gossip accounts and local reporters. In the video, Madison slammed a phone on the table. "You're disgusting, Daniel. You think I wouldn't find out?" Daniel leaned back, unbothered. "Find out what?" "You and that investor's wife," she shouted. "You're sleeping with her." The restaurant fell silent. Cameras caught every second. Daniel stood, his voice sharp. "You're embarrassing yourself." Madison, furious and heavily pregnant, shoved the phone in his face. "Don't you dare play innocent." He grabbed her wrist. "You were just a prettier version of Clara," he hissed, "until you got fat." The gasp from the room was audible. Someone filmed the whole thing. By morning, it had gone viral. The headlines were merciless. Daniel Hayes explodes on pregnant fiancé. Sponsors began pulling out. His investors panicked. For Clara, it was the first time she'd tasted satisfaction in a long while. But there was one thing she hadn't expected: Madison calling her. The phone rang that evening. Clara almost ignored it, then picked up. "Clara?" Madison's voice was shaky, not the sharp, mocking tone she remembered. "I'm surprised you'd call," Clara said flatly. "I had to. You were right. Everything you said about him, it's all true. He's cruel. Clara stayed silent. Madison's voice cracked. He used me. I thought I was the exception, but I was just the next one. I'm so stupid. Clara's tone softened only slightly. You made your choice, Madison. I know, and I'll pay for it forever. But you need to know something. Clara's pulse quickened. What? Daniel never filed our marriage papers, Madison whispered. He said he did, but I checked. I'm not legally his wife. I'm nothing. Clara froze. What are you talking about? I mean, everything he owns, the land, the homes, they're still registered under Hayes Development, which falls under your original estate. He never fixed the titles. You still own the land, Clara. Every inch of it. The line went quiet for a moment, only the sound of Madison's shaky breath on the other end. Clara whispered, He built his empire on my property. Madison's voice broke, and now it's falling apart. Later that night, Clara drove out to the dam alone. The air was heavy with the promise of rain, the clouds swollen and dark. She stood by the railing, watching lightning flicker across the valley. The water below churned like something alive. Her reflection stared back at her, calm, unflinching. She whispered, You built your heaven on my tears. Let's see if it floats. Thunder answered her. The first drops of rain began to fall. The rain came down hard that night, hammering against the cabin roof like angry fingers. Thunder rolled in waves across the valley, shaking the windows. Clara didn't flinch. She sat at her table, surrounded by piles of papers, copies of deeds, recordings, Noah's reports, and the photos of cracks beneath the dam. Everything she needed to see the full picture was right in front of her. Daniel thought he owned everything. He didn't. He thought he was untouchable. He wasn't. She ran her finger along the edge of the property file Madison had mentioned. Her father's name, her own, still appeared on the original registry. The new developments were listed as subplots under her estate, built without proper transfer or permission. Paradise Heights didn't belong to Daniel Hayes. It belonged to Clara Matthews Hayes, legally, entirely, and irrevocably. Lightning flashed outside. She stared at the flickering shadows, her mind turning like the gears of a machine. She didn't need to destroy him outright. The world would do it for her. Her phone buzzed. It was Noah. You still up? His message read. She typed back. Couldn't sleep. A few seconds later, his name lit up her screen. She answered. I've been going through the reports, he said over the sound of rain. You were right. The dam's pressure levels are unstable. If we get another storm like this one, it's going to overflow. He's been diverting runoff channels into holding pools near Lot 9. That's why the soil's sinking. Clara stood and walked to the window. Can you prove it? I can, Noah said, but not before the weekend. The city's shutting down for the holiday. Everything's delayed. We've got maybe 48 hours before it gets worse. Her voice was calm. Then we don't wait. There was a pause. Clara, what are you thinking? I'm thinking he needs to feel what it's like to lose control of something he thought he owned. His tone softened. Clara, don't do anything reckless. Let the evidence speak. Once I submit it. She cut him off. You think paperwork scares men like Daniel? He built his career lying on paper. He exhaled through the line. And if you cross that line, you'll become him. Her voice dropped. No, I'll end him. Before he could reply, she hung up. By morning, the rain hadn't stopped. The roads shimmered with mud and runoff, the sky heavy with a sickly gray light. Clara drove into town under her hood, barely visible through the downpour. She stopped outside the courthouse again just to see it. Her name etched on that old damn registry, sitting quietly in a file cabinet no one ever looked at. When she stepped back outside, the wind nearly tore the umbrella from her hands. The whole town smelled like wet concrete and tension. As she walked back to her truck, she saw something across the street. Daniel and Madison leaving a cafe, reporters swarming them. Madison looked pale and shaken, but Daniel wore his usual smug grin, flashing it at the cameras as if nothing could touch him. "Mr. Hayes," one reporter shouted, "are the rumors true? Did you falsify inspection reports for Paradise Heights?" Daniel smirked. "Don't believe everything you read. My company follows every regulation. We build dreams here." Clara watched from her truck, her fingers tightening around the steering wheel. His arrogance was endless. Even when the world was starting to turn on him, he smiled as if he owned it. When Madison slipped and Daniel yanked her arm roughly to keep her upright, Clara felt something click inside her. The pity she'd felt for Madison evaporated. He'd used them both, one for power, one for image, and now both were broken in his hands. She drove away without being seen, the rain swallowing the noise of her tires. Back at the cabin, she packed a small bag, flashlight, gloves, her father's old wrench, and a copy of the dam's maintenance blueprint Noah had left with her. She moved like someone who'd made peace with her decision. By nightfall, the storm had grown into something monstrous. The valley below was a blur of wind and rain. Paradise Heights glowed in the distance, lights flickering through the downpour, the faint hum of generators keeping the luxury homes alive while everything else drowned. She drove as far as the road allowed, then walked the rest of the way to the dam. Water crashed against the walls below, roaring louder than thunder. The concrete trembled faintly underfoot, alive and angry. At the control shed, she found the gate lever, the one her father had shown her when she was young. "Only open it with respect," he used to say. "This dam doesn't forgive greed." Clara touched the cold metal handle, feeling it vibrate with the force of the storm-fed current below. She stood there for a long time, staring down at the water that shimmered with lightning. "Clara?" She turned sharply. Noah was standing behind her, drenched, his hair plastered to his forehead. He must have followed her truck's tire tracks up the road. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "Neither should you," he shouted over the wind. "Whatever you're thinking, stop. This isn't you." She took a step closer to the edge. "You don't know what I am anymore." "I know exactly what you are," he said, stepping closer. "You're the one person who doesn't deserve to carry his sins." She looked at him, her eyes fierce but glistening. "He built 10 homes on the land where my father's orchard grew. He sold the ground that raised me and filled it with strangers. He destroyed everything sacred. And you want me to let the rain wash him clean?" "I want you to survive this," he said. The thunder swallowed the rest of his words. For a moment, neither of them moved. Rain poured between them like a curtain. Then Clara reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded photo. Daniel and Madison at the gate of Paradise Heights, smiling beneath the banner. She held it out to him. "You see this?" she said. "Every smile, every lie, every brick, it's mine. He just built it higher so I'd never climb back." Noah shook his head. "You don't need to climb back. You already won. He's falling apart without your help." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Not fast enough." Lightning ripped across the sky, lighting the valley below. From where they stood, they could see the rooftops of the 10 luxury homes, bright, proud, defenseless. The wind carried faint music from a party Daniel was throwing to prove he was still in control. Listen, Clara said softly. He's celebrating again. He always celebrates before he ruins something. Then walk away, Noah said, his voice strained. Don't let him ruin you too. She smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. You said your father died because of Daniel's negligence, right? Maybe this is the land's way of remembering both of us. She turned back toward the lever. The rain came harder now, blurring her vision. She wrapped her fingers around the cold handle. Clara, please, Noah said, his voice breaking through the storm. She didn't look at him. She just stared at the roaring water below, her reflection flickering like a ghost between lightning strikes. You built your heaven on my tears, she whispered. Let's see if it floats. Her grip tightened on the lever. The storm howled, and the dam began to tremble. The storm raged all night, a living thing tearing through the valley. Rain came in waves, crashing against the dam and clawing at the glass towers of Paradise Heights. The air itself felt electric, humming with a kind of fury that had been building for years. Clara's fury, finally finding its shape in the sky. Down below, the 10 luxury homes glowed like candles in the dark. Music floated up through the rain. Daniel's party, loud and proud, cutting through thunder as if he could outshout nature itself. Inside the largest house, Daniel stood at the center of a glittering crowd, drink in hand, suit immaculate. Madison hovered near him, silent, eyes hollow. She looked worn, swollen from pregnancy, and no longer the bright trophy he paraded around. He didn't notice her. He never did. Tonight, Daniel announced, his voice booming over the storm outside, we celebrate vision, courage, and success. He raised his glass as lightning flashed through the windows. Paradise Heights stands as proof that nothing can tear down what we build. The crowd cheered, half drunk, half dazzled. They didn't see the walls trembling with the vibration of distant thunder. They didn't see the water rising inch by inch at the property's edge. But Clara did. She stood on the dam's upper walkway, drenched, her hair plastered to her face. The lever was cold beneath her palm. The storm roared around her, the wind tearing at her coat, but she didn't move. Her mind was as clear as the floodwaters below, powerful, steady, unstoppable. She opened the first floodgate, not all the way, just enough. A surge of water burst through the spillway, rushing down the valley like a living scream. It tore through the lower roads, overrun drains, and sliced across the base of Paradise Heights. Lights flickered. Sirens began to wail. Clara watched the wave hit the edges of the estate, swallowing the lowest gardens. She wasn't trying to kill. Not yet. This was a warning, the kind Daniel couldn't ignore. Inside the mansion, guests screamed as water pushed against the glass walls. Daniel's investors stumbled toward the exits, shouting into phones, tripping over furniture. Madison clutched her stomach, crying out for help. Daniel didn't move at first. He stood staring at the flood outside, disbelief painted across his face. It's just runoff, he muttered. It'll pass. But when the floor shuddered underfoot and a chandelier crashed to the ground, even he began to panic. Get everyone out! He barked at the staff, his voice breaking through the chaos. Shut the gates! Block the water! Ethan burst into the room, soaked to the skin. The retaining walls are giving way, he shouted. You've got to call emergency services. Daniel turned on him. You told me this place was safe. I told you we needed more time. You wanted it open before the inspectors came back. Their shouting was drowned out by the sound of the foundation cracking. Furniture slid across the marble floors as the water forced its way inside. Up on the hill, Clara watched, expressionless. She could see flashes of panic, headlights cutting through the dark as cars tried to escape the estate. The flood had reached their driveways. Paradise Heights was no longer paradise. It was a sinking island. Her phone buzzed. Noah. She let it ring once, twice, then answered.
"What did you do?"
His voice was full of fear. "I warned him," she said calmly. "You opened the gates, didn't you? Clara, that dam can't take much more pressure." "It's not about the dam," she said quietly. "It's about him." "Listen to me," he said urgently. "If this keeps going, you won't be able to control it. You'll destroy everything, even your own land." She looked at the rising torrent below. "Maybe some things need to be destroyed." She ended the call. Inside the mansion, chaos had become hysteria. Water poured down the grand staircase, dragging rugs and furniture with it. Guests climbed onto tables, clutching their phones, screaming for help that wasn't coming. Madison was sitting on the floor, shaking, her hand pressed to her belly. "Daniel, we have to go," she cried. He ignored her, shoving past people toward the main window. "It's not possible," he muttered. "This dam can't fail." He turned on Ethan again. "Call Clara. She has to know something about this." Ethan's eyes widened. "Clara? You think she—" Daniel grabbed his collar. "You don't get it. That dam was hers. She's the only one who could have—" Then he froze. Outside, under the flash of lightning, he saw her. Clara stood on the dam's walkway, silhouetted against the storm, coat whipping in the wind. For a moment, it was like seeing a ghost, the ghost of every mistake he'd made, every lie he'd told, every woman he'd broken. His voice dropped to a whisper. "No." The flood alarm screamed louder. Madison tried to stand, slipping in the water. "Daniel, we have to leave." He turned toward her, furious. "You think she scares me? She's nothing." But even as he said it, his voice cracked. The walls groaned. A section of the lower foundation gave way, sending another rush of water through the property. Ethan ran for the door, shouting at Madison to follow, but Daniel stayed rooted to the spot, watching Clara across the valley, watching the storm itself bend to her will. At the dam, Noah appeared out of the darkness again, soaked and desperate. "Clara!" he shouted over the roar of water. "You need to close it before it's too late." She turned to face him, calm despite the chaos. "It's already too late." "No!" He grabbed her shoulders. "You can still stop this. You've already won, Clara. He's finished. Look at him. The investors are gone. The town knows the truth." "This isn't about the town," she said quietly. "This is between me and the land he violated." Thunder cracked overhead, shaking the ground beneath them. A spray of cold water hit their faces as the dam trembled under the strain. "Please," Noah said, his voice breaking. "If you do this, it's not justice anymore. It's vengeance." She stared past him, her eyes locked on the glow of Paradise Heights below. Maybe vengeance is what justice looks like when it finally stops apologizing. Noah stepped back, realizing he couldn't reach her through words. She turned again toward the floodgates. Down below, she saw Madison's car stuck halfway on the hill road, water climbing the tires. Madison was inside, pounding on the glass, trapped by the current. Clara froze. The rain blurred everything except that sight. A terrified woman screaming for help. The same woman who'd once laughed while Clara's world burned. For a heartbeat, Clara did nothing. The flood roared louder, the dam walls shivering under the weight of choice. Then she ran. Noah shouted her name, but she didn't stop. She raced down the slippery path, mud and rain soaking her legs. When she reached the car, the water was waist-high. Madison's eyes were wide with panic. "Clara!" she screamed. "Please!" Without hesitation, Clara wrenched the door open against the pressure. The current nearly swept her off her feet. She grabbed Madison's arm and pulled with all her strength. Together, they stumbled through the water until Noah reached them, hauling Madison the rest of the way up the slope. By the time they reached safety, both women were shaking, gasping for breath. Madison fell to her knees, sobbing. Clara stood silently beside her, watching the homes below collapse under the surge. Paradise Heights was gone, swallowed whole by the very water Daniel had claimed to control. From across the valley came the sound of sirens, flood response units, reporters, chaos. Clara didn't move. She just stared down at the ruins as the storm began to quiet, the sky slowly fading to gray. Noah stood beside her, breathing hard. "You saved her," he said softly. Clara didn't answer. "You could have let her die," he continued, "but you didn't." Finally, she turned toward him. Her eyes were calm. "I wasn't saving her," she said. "I was saving myself." The wind carried away her words, and for the first time in years, she felt something strange. Not joy, not victory, but release. The storm had broken, so had she, in the best possible way. Down below, Daniel stood in knee-deep water, his house in ruins. Reporters' cameras flashed, even as police pulled him away in handcuffs. His empire was gone, his mask shattered. The flood had done what no one else could. It had stripped him bare. And Clara watched it all from the hill, her coat still dripping, her expression unreadable. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to celebrate. The land had spoken for her. The morning after the flood, the valley looked like the end of the world. Mud covered everything. Fallen branches and shattered beams floated where roads used to be. The once glittering homes of Paradise Heights lay broken and half-submerged, their marble and glass cracked open like shells. The air was heavy with silence, the kind that follows screaming. Rescue teams worked for hours, pulling people from wreckage. Some houses were completely gone. Others stood leaning, skeletons of what they'd been. Clara sat on a rock near the dam, wrapped in a blanket one of the responders had handed her. She hadn't said a word since they'd found her and Noah. The officers had asked questions, but Noah answered them all, keeping her out of it as much as he could. He told them she was a witness, not a cause, a survivor, not a suspect. She just stared out at the flooded valley, eyes dry and distant. When the officers finally moved on, Noah crouched beside her. "It's over," he said softly. She nodded but didn't look at him. "Is it?" "Daniel's finished," Noah said. "The investigators already found the forged reports. The city's pressing charges for embezzlement, insurance fraud, environmental violations. It's all coming down on him." A faint, tired smile flickered across her face. "He built everything on lies. I guess they couldn't float." Noah didn't laugh. He just watched her carefully. "They'll probably want to talk to you again, about the dam, the floodgates." She finally looked at him. "You think I caused it?" "I think you could have," he said quietly, "but you didn't. You opened it just enough. You warned them." She nodded, staring at the water again. "That's all I ever wanted, to be heard." 3 days later, Daniel was arrested. Reporters flooded the town with cameras and microphones, snapping every second as police escorted him from a temporary shelter in handcuffs. His face was pale, his jaw clenched tight, but he still tried to play the part. "Gentlemen," he said, forcing a smile, "this was a natural disaster. No one's to blame." One of the officers cut him off. "Save it for the court." When they pushed him into the police car, Daniel caught sight of Clara across the street. She was standing with Noah near a relief tent, her hair tied back, her clothes simple. Their eyes met. For the first time, Daniel didn't see the woman he'd thrown away. He saw something that scared him. Not anger, not hate, but peace. He mouthed something at her through the window as the car door slammed. She couldn't hear the words, but she could read them easily. "You did this." She didn't answer. She just turned away. The court hearings went on for weeks. Evidence piled up: stolen funds, bribed officials, forged reports. Ethan testified early on, his voice shaking as he admitted to helping Daniel falsify documents. He couldn't look at Clara once. Madison arrived late, pale and quiet, heavily pregnant. She sat behind the prosecution table, not as a defendant, but as a witness. The press tore her apart, but she didn't fight back. She had her own punishment to live with. Daniel tried to shift the blame to everyone else, first his staff, then his brother-in-law, then finally Clara. In a last desperate move, he claimed she'd opened the floodgates deliberately to destroy his business. The courtroom gasped. Clara sat calmly in the front row, hands folded. She didn't react. She didn't need to. Noah took the stand next. He presented the inspection data, the financial records, the maintenance logs, every proof that Daniel's negligence had caused the disaster. When the judge asked Noah directly, "Could this flood have been prevented?" he said yes, if Daniel Hayes hadn't ignored safety warnings for profit. The defense went silent after that. By the end of the trial, the verdict was clear. Daniel Hayes, guilty on all counts. As officers led him away, he turned toward Clara one last time. His voice was low, but the bitterness in it reached across the courtroom. "You think you won?" he hissed. "Everything I built was yours anyway. You just didn't have the guts to claim it." Clara didn't even blink. "You're right," she said softly, "but I found something better to build." Weeks passed. The floodwaters receded, leaving behind scars, but also clarity. The town began rebuilding. The government took over the damaged lands, promising stricter regulations. Clara's name was cleared entirely. Her father's estate was reinstated. Ethan left town quietly. No one saw him go. Madison stayed. She gave birth to a daughter on a calm Sunday morning. When Clara visited the hospital weeks later, Madison looked fragile, but there was a gentleness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. The baby slept in her arms, small and peaceful. "I named her Grace," Madison said softly. "Grace Clara." Clara blinked, surprised. "You didn't have to do that." Madison smiled weakly. "No, I did. Because if it weren't for you, neither of us would be here. I know you didn't do it to save me, but you did anyway." Clara looked down at the baby. Grace's tiny hand curled around her finger, and for the first time in years, something warm bloomed in her chest. Something close to forgiveness. "She'll never know what we did wrong," Clara said quietly. "Only what we did right after." Madison nodded, tears filling her eyes. "I hope so." Months later, spring returned to the valley. The orchard land that had once held Daniel's empire was green again, the soil fresh from rain and renewal. Clara had rebuilt part of the property, not with glass and marble, but with purpose. Where the main house once stood, now rose a community center made of reclaimed wood and stone. It wasn't grand, it wasn't shiny, but it was alive. Children ran through the gardens where the floodwaters had once raged. Families displaced by the disaster worked side by side planting trees, building benches, repainting walls. At the far edge of the property stood a memorial garden, small plaques engraved with the names of those who'd lost homes, businesses, and loved ones in the storm. The last plaque bore a single name, Daniel Hayes. Noah had helped her build it. He stood beside her now, hands in his pockets, looking out at the calm water that once threatened to swallow everything. "You could have left," he said quietly. "Started somewhere new." Clara smiled faintly. "I don't want new. I want home." He nodded, watching her as she stepped closer to the edge of the dam. The water shimmered beneath the sun, still and quiet now, reflecting the sky like glass. Clara spoke softly, almost to herself. "Funny thing about water. It remembers. Every drop that falls here knows where it came from. And one day, it always finds its way back." She turned to Noah. "People are like that too." He smiled gently. So where do you go from here? She looked out at the horizon, the valley reborn under golden light. Forward, she said. But I'll let the past rest where it belongs, under the water. As the wind moved through the valley, carrying the faint laughter of children and the rustle of leaves, Clara's voice, calm, reflective, and strong, filled the silence. They built mansions on my pain. I built peace on their ruins. Revenge doesn't shout, it flows quietly, like water, and one day it finds its way home. The camera of the mind would pull back then, the dam gleaming in the distance, the garden blooming over once broken ground, the river flowing gently through the heart of everything that survived. Clara stood at its center, not victorious, not vengeful, but whole. The land had remembered her, and she, finally, had remembered herself.